Alright, hey guys, Mr. E back at you for the second time today, this time with a more general overview look at everything that's coming with the patch on the 23rd. Not just talking about the Arbites, although a lot of it is Arbites related, but also about the other content, the other changes that you'll be seeing in the game, which are, there's actually quite a good number. So not all of this is going to be in great detail. I'll try to add detail where I think is relevant. But this is sort of an overview, big picture, like top line description of a lot of stuff. For full disclosure, this is the document that we were given to explain the changes that you would expect to see at the patch. I haven't seen any official patch notes, like actual official patch notes from Fat Shark just yet. So this is what we're working with, and I'll give it context where it's needed. To make this more fun and engaging, I'm actually going to be comparing what we're seeing here in the changes that are actually coming to the game with my predictions. And if any of you watched the videos before any of this was announced, I made predictions, and I'm very glad that I wrote them down. I'm very glad I made videos about them because, I seem like an absolute genius on some of these, honestly. What I did was, once I saw that first teaser trailer, which ended up having, the dog's point of view, we didn't even know it was a dog at the time. I immediately started looking around to see what other people thought. I started looking up. I thought it was a dog immediately, and then the Arbites was the standout character. So right off the top here, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be coloring things green that I got correct, yellow if I kind of hit it halfway, and if it's something I just completely took a miss on, I'm going to color it red. So you'll notice that the class itself and having a dog as its pet, were top of the line items, and I have made those green because I 100% called that pretty much from square one. And let's get underway with the patch notes, and we'll keep that as a frame of reference. By the way, if you enjoy my insights on this sort of content, my patch breakdowns and my general analysis of Darktide, go ahead and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Helps me out, helps you out. Hopefully you get more information, become more knowledgeable about this game that we both love. All right, let's move on. We have ourselves the combat abilities up first. The combat abilities for the Arbites are the Nuncio Aquila. This is your base ability. You'll start at level 1 with this, and it paints this area on the ground. You can either paint it on you, or you can throw it a certain distance. It flies like a really slow football, and then it starts to channel its like little chorus, and it replenishes toughness 7.5% per second to all allies in the radius, and then all enemies within the radius take increased damage. Now, this is something I thought that there would be a ability for the dog, where the dog would go out and he would cover a circular area, and he would hamper enemies that came into the area, and then you would regenerate toughness while you were in the area. And I think that's pretty much dead on what this ended up being. If I can make one criticism of myself in the past, it's that I thought everything about the Arbites class would be dog related. I thought that every keystone was going to be dog related. I thought that every ultimate was going to be dog related. So yes, this doesn't have a dog in it necessarily, but it's a zone that gives your allies defensive buffs and hurts enemies, or not hurts enemies, but debuffs enemies. And that's 1-to-1 with what I said. So I'm giving myself the win on that one. The one I won't take the win on is this second one here, Castigator's Stance. This is not something I would have ever thought, but you enter into basically Robocop stance, where you are impenetrable to damage. You take 80% reduced damage. You move 15% faster, just walking around very menacingly while you're doing this, and you can get a bunch of extra damage. It reloads your gun for you while you're shooting, so you can just non-stop beam people in the head with your revolver if you want to go full Robocop there. This stance is very, very cool to play around, and I imagine there's some very good builds that could be made with it. I mean, I don't have to say imagine. I've made some very good builds with it. I did not get this at all, though, so I'm going to give myself a red on that one, because the third one that I chose was Break the Line. Pretty much nailed this one to a T. I thought that there would be a dash that staggers enemies. It does a AoE CC at the end of the dash or charge, and that is exactly what we're getting. It's just Kruger's Bull Rush, or whatever it's called, in Vermintide 2, and it is awesome. And I also thought that it would make the dog like act in tandem with you and like jump to your aid and start attacking the same targets you're attacking. It actually has an augment that makes the dog do increased damage when you charge. So pretty much nailing this one, just 100%. So green on that. Then we've got the Blitz abilities. Okay, so right off the top, I claimed that there would be, I mean, obviously there's 3 Blitz abilities, but I claimed that 2 of the Blitz abilities would be grenades. They would therefore take grenade packs to refill your charges, and that the third one would be a cooldown-based thing that affects the dog. And so I will give myself the green on that because I did correctly call the ratio of resource-based grenades to grenade-taking grenades. That doesn't make any sense. Cooldown-based blitzes versus grenade-based blitzes. There you go. So I correctly called that. I did not, however, correctly call the Arbites grenade. I think that was just like too simple an idea for me. It's just an impact grenade. It's just a very, very potent impact grenade. You get 4 of them. It's a super solid blitz, honestly. It pretty much fits exactly with what the Arbites needs. So I didn't get that at all. I'll give myself half credit on this next one, remote detonation. This is the cooldown based one. So I thought that there would be a cooldown based effect for the dog that would give the dog like steroids basically, and he would go crazy and like run faster and hit harder and all that stuff. This makes the dog deal damage, like he explodes and does like an EMP discharge around his location, knocks back enemies and does like electrocution to them, but it doesn't make him like, get a steroid buff or anything. So I can only really give myself half credit on that one. But then I absolutely nailed the third, which is the voltaic shock mine. I thought that there would be a electric grenade or like a stun or like a shock grenade. I thought for certain there would be some way to like throw out something that has a persistent CC. If you can get enemies to walk into it, it would like lock down certain approaches, and absolutely this ended up being true because we got the voltaic shock mine. Now the voltaic shock mine is very cool, something we've never seen before in Darktide. You throw these mines out and they do not have, as far as I could tell, there's no duration in which they expire. They just sit on the floor, and then the first time an enemy walks within 5 meters, it starts shocking, and then every enemy that walks into that radius for the next 15 seconds gets shocked. So, you can like set up your trap, go and pull a bunch of enemies back to you and run them through that shock mine, and there you go. You've cleared out the whole room with very, very little danger to yourself. 15 seconds is a lot of time to get your work done too. So I really love this blitz, and I 100% called that one. Then we got to turn our eyes to the weapons. So I was also pretty prophetic about these weapons. My first claim, or one of my claims, was that there would be a special shotgun for the class. They're calling it here the Arbites shotgun. In the game, it's ended up being called the Executioner shotgun, and I thought it would have an airburst or a stun-based shell. And in fact, the base mark for this gun does indeed have electrocution and stun properties when you use the special when you load the special shell. One really cool thing about these shotguns is that rack of 6 shells on top of the shotgun that you've seen in all the footage is actually used. You pull those shells out, those are your special shells, and after you shoot all 6 of them, you don't have any more until you pick up another pack of ammo. It can be any size ammo pack, it'll replenish all 6 of them, but I think it's a cool way to make sure you're not just spamming it relentlessly. And then so I'm going to give myself a 100% credit for that one, by the way. Arbites Shock Maul is the second one coming up here. Now, I didn't call this because it's a one-handed version of existing weapons. I didn't think they would do an Arbites version of the Shock Maul because the Shock Maul is already a thing. So I didn't think this simple, I guess, is my excuse for why I didn't claim this. But this weapon is cool. It's very different than, well, it's not very different, but it's different than the existing Shock Maul, which has that like sort of cattle prod thing where you hold it out and shock the enemies. This one, its weapon special just does a quick lay attack, and if you hit an enemy that's already shocked, which is pretty easy to do considering your regular attack shock and this attack shocks as well, it'll stun them. So you can like have a mauler or a rager who's attacking you, and you hit them one time with your regular attack, and then you hit them with a special attack, and they'll get stunned. They'll fall out of their animation. So that's pretty cool. So I can't get credit for that, but I can get some credit for the Arbites Shot Pistol and Riot Shield. This is something that I definitely thought was going to be coming to the class. I skipped over one, but we'll go back, which was a pistol plus a riot shield. I know I didn't necessarily call the shot pistol like 1-to-1. I thought it would be the Shredder auto pistol because they just reworked it, but I think that's pretty damn close. Like a pistol plus a riot shield. Considering there's no other range / shield combos in the game, I think that's pretty prophetic to make a call my shot like that. No pun intended. So I'll give myself the green on that one, and I'll also give myself a big old green check mark for the Arbites Shock Maul and Suppression Shield. This was my first idea for a weapon for the class. Which was that there will be a riot shield plus like stun baton or something, because it's 100% exactly what the Arbites sort of fantasy is, right? That you're like a riot police. Well, you're supposed to be Judge Dredd, but it kind of ends up being like military, like riot police, like domestic control. So yeah, I 100% called this one. The bonus thing to this that I didn't expect was that this would have its own special action. This weapon has a very special, it's very solid on its own, but it has this charge that builds up over time when you're blocking or staggering enemies, I believe. Maybe it's just blocking. But it builds up over time, and you can slam the shield with the mace, and it'll like flashbang all enemies in front of you and stop them from shooting, which is very nice. To get you back on better footing. Weapon is solid even without that too. Alright, so we had a good number of wins there for weapons. We'll come back to talking about the rest of the weapon balancing in a minute here. Then we've got the Cyber Mastiff. I didn't really have a whole lot of claims about the Cyber Mastiff, other than I thought that everything in the class would be related to him in some way, shape, or form. But one assertion that I held right from the beginning, pretty much, was that the Cyber Mastiff would be an invincible NPC. He wouldn't be, liable to get killed. And this is just because, one, that would be really annoying. Two, it would be sad. And three, if you wanted it to scale to higher difficulties, he would just immediately get blatted by like everything. I mean, we've seen what happens to bots when you take them past sedition difficulty. They just immediately get dumpstered. They're useless. So I'm very glad that that came true. I'll give myself the win on that one. And now we're going to skip forward a good bit in these notes, because this is just talking about specifics about the weapons. Again, if you want to hear about specifics about these different weapons and the exact sort of swing patterns and blessings that they have, tune in tomorrow. I'm releasing a video on all of that. We got to talk about some stuff that I did not touch on at all. Some stuff that they kind of surprised us all with, which is that there is a new structure to how missions and difficulties are handled in the game. So prior to this, you had a level requirement for getting into certain difficulties, right? When you reached, I think it's level 4, you could get into Malice. When you reached level 7 or something like that, it was Heresy, and level 11 is Damnation, or something like crazy like that, which is bad for newer players, because what's the obvious thing that the game is pushing you to do is, okay, you unlock this new difficulty, you should be playing at this new difficulty. That's the assumed progression, right? But that is actually not how the game should be played. You should be getting a certain level of mastery at X difficulty before advancing to the next one. So the new way that this is structured is to promote players to master the difficulty they're currently playing at before they ascend and matriculate up to the next one. So they're not getting absolutely fragged by going into Heresy when they were playing on Malice before. In addition to this, they are making the mission board difficulty agnostic, by which I mean there's not going to be difficulties that are tied to certain maps and stuff on the mission board. You'll have your 10 options or whatever it is on the board, and all of them can be played at all 5 difficulties. And when you increase the difficulty, it'll change like the modifiers on the map. So you won't see like Pox Gas or high intensity Shock Troop Gauntlet at low difficulties, but at high difficulties, some of those maps will take on those extra penalties, extra difficulties, which is cool. And there is also a Maelstrom mission that becomes available once you are selecting Heresy and Auric difficulties. Now, this is another very interesting thing, which is that there are still only 5 difficulties in the game, but there is no longer a separate page for Auric missions, because what they've done is now Damnation, the previous 5th difficulty, is now the 4th difficulty, and Auric is its own 5th difficulty. So you'll see this in some of my footage, but it's just they've removed Sedition. So the lowest difficulty, there's not 6 difficulties now, there's still only 5. They nixed Sedition because they realized that Sedition is such an uninteresting and boring run through of the game. I've always felt that, and I'm glad they saw that. It's just not at all the experience that the game is intending to provide. So now you will have this more natural progression to play Auric, which I think is great, because a lot of times players were playing up to Damnation, and then they were just staying at regular Damnation missions forever because they were too afraid to toggle to that second page where it has the Auric missions and try those. But now the way that the difficulties are gated, you will complete your Damnation missions, and then it'll naturally sort of push you to trying Aurics, which is the equivalent of Auric Damnation from before. The way that this works, by the way, as far as progression, is as you complete missions of a certain difficulty, say you're completing Malice missions, you'll have a bar that is filling towards Heresy difficulty. And I think it feels it's a 5 missions or so that you have to complete in order to go up to that next difficulty. And once you have Heresy unlocked, you cannot revert down. But say you won 4 missions in the Malice to Heresy bracket, so you're 40% or you're 80% of the way there. If you lose one now, it'll lower you to 60%, and you'll have to complete 2 more to get to the next difficulty. And I think this is to prevent players from I can play with my best friend Jimmy, who's fucking cracked at this game for 3 games, and you'll win all 3 of those games. But then if you play on your own and you're absolutely not ready to be playing at this difficulty, you'll lose, and it'll push you back down until such time as you can demonstrate that over the course of 5 or 6 games or whatever it is, you can at least win more than you're losing, right? And that way you can get up to the next difficulty. And this is just a much more sensible progression system to prove that you can at least get into, engage with the content that's going on. Because we've all played Heresy difficulty on the current iteration of the game and be holy shit, these people are dying instantly. Because Heresy represents a huge step up in terms of difficulty from Malice. All right, and as I just said, you can never be demoted to a lower difficulty level, so don't worry about losing a bunch of games because you're just trolling and then not being able to play anything higher than Malice. And for most of us, this won't affect us at all because your existing characters it'll look at the missions that they've completed and say, okay, this person should just have access to Auric. There you go, easy peasy. So that does it. I don't know if it's based on character progression or account-wide progression, but they say character, so I'm going to assume it's per character that you will have to raise your level. Then we need to talk about how the new story works. Now, if you want more in-depth looks at the actual story that is coming to Darktide, or the semblance of some sort of narrative that's coming to Darktide, that is not really usually my forte. I would turn you over to Joe Plays Games. She's going to have a narrative breakdown of exactly what sort of story they're trying to tell with this new stuff. But just to kind of tell you what to expect, it is not that there is a crazy new interwoven story with 3D rendered cutscenes and all that stuff. No, it's just the sort of same thing that you had in Vermintide 2, where there is some narration and some text that contextualizes why you were going on this mission. And then when you complete the mission, it's okay, good job on this mission. That means that this threat is dealt with and it has exposed this other threat that we now need to deal with. And it takes you through a linear progression of, I think there's 17 maps in the series. And so it actually kind of tells the story in a cohesive and coherent way. And one thing I wouldn't have noticed on my own, but Joe Plays Games pointed out, which is that when you start the story, you are only fighting against scab enemies, because scab enemies are the traitorous 21st, Mobian 21st Regiment, right? So they are just like the regular soldiers. Then after a little bit, you will be introduced to crushers, more getting a little bit crazier as the sort of the conflict heats up. Then you'll be introduced to the Cult of Admonition / the dregs, the guys in like tan / yellow armor, and those are the enemies who are like channeling demon hosts and the Nurgle. They're the cult that is channeling all these demons onto the planet, into the city. So they are the source of the monsters. There's no scab-related monstrous bosses. Those are all related to the cult. So that's when you will start to see the bosses, is after you are introduced to those characters. I thought that was really cool that like you don't see those enemies immediately, because like it represents like, oh yeah, this threat is escalating when you see those first bosses, which is pretty nice, and I'm glad she noticed that. I think that's everything we need to really say here, except for how your existing characters will handle this. If you're level 10 or above, when you load into the game for the first time, it'll give you a pop-up and say, hey, there's a new storyline for Darktide, do you want to play it? And if you say yes, then you can. If you say no, then it'll just skip it. If you say yes and you get 2 games in and you're like, okay, this sucks, I don't want to play this anymore, you can go to the hair salon dude and do the personality scourge, click through, and then say, no, I want to skip it at the end. So there you go. All right, now we're back onto the more prediction-based stuff with weapon balances, which I know is something that you guys are probably very excited for, because not only is this class getting new weapons, but a lot of the older weapons are getting reworks. And let's first read Fat Shark's justification for these weapon balances before we get into which weapons are receiving the balances. So this is an initial set of balance adjustments that is focused on improving underperforming weapons so they can compete with top tier options. Let's skip that a little bit and contextualize that, which is they are aware that there are very powerful top tier options that need addressing, but first they are choosing to elevate the lower performing ones rather than immediately nerfing the top ones, which I think is absolutely the best way to go about this, right? All of these weapons were like C tier weapons, most of them anyway, and if you had nerfed the dueling sword and the dagger and whatever other A and S tier weapons there were, and then the only weapons we're left with to play with are the C tier weapons, that's going to feel really bad for everyone. So what they've done instead is they buffed these C tier weapons up, and then next they are going to be nerfing those very, very high performing weapons down, so that you're not like, oh my fucking god, like everything is gone to shit now, like all these weapons that I'm left with suck. No, now there's lots of potential options. I'll say just from my play experience so far, I haven't played with all of these, but I have played with the Shock Maul, and that thing fucking slaps now. Like that little bonky stick from before, you'll see in my builds, that thing is destroying. So that is one of my new S tier weapons. Somehow this weapon is S tier, and we're living in crazy times. So I think this bodes really well. Especially if they continue these balances in the future as they're saying. The reason that I thought they would make these changes, and that Fat Shark did make these changes, is also because they are introducing weapons that fit into some of these categories, right? They're introducing a new Arbites shotgun, they're introducing new Arbites shock mauls, right? So they can't have the Arbites versions of them be good at all, which obviously they're not going to introduce new weapons and have them be dog water. They're going to introduce powerful new weapons so players want to buy the class and play the class. And they can't introduce those that are like A tier weapons and then have their competitors be like C and D tier weapons. So I thought, correctly so, that shock mauls and shotguns would be seeing reworks with this patch to bring them up to snuff. And so I will give myself big points for correctly guessing both of those, even when I was talking about weapons that would be receiving balance changes or buffs or overhauls. I did not, however, expect that the other weapons that would be receiving buffs, and by the way, all of these are buffs in some form or another, we will be getting into the specifics of this tomorrow, are the Devil's Claw swords, the tack axes, the shock mauls, the heavy eviscerators, the Hellbore las guns, the combat shotguns, and the double-barreled shotgun. So this is a great set of weapons to start with, right? Notably, the Indignatus Crusher is not on here. This is a weapon that the class does have access to, but it does not receive any buffs. And I honestly think it might need, it's a good weapon, right? But it could use a little bit of a buff, because I think the shock maul is like 3 times better than it right now, which is crazy. But yeah, that should be very, very exciting for lots and lots of different players, and we'll see that on future days. There's nowhere in this patch notes where they mention anything about the Keystones, so I want to touch on my assertions, my claims about these Keystones really quickly so we can move on and wrap up this video. I claim that there would be 3 different Keystones for the class. I claim that all 3 of them would be dog-related, exclusively dog-related. One would be something to do with the dog having synergy with its master, such as like if you attack X target, the dog will then attack the same target and do better follow-up damage, and vice versa. I think that's borne out in one of the Keystones, but I can't really give myself credit because there are 2 Keystones which I was nowhere near, so I am going to make those 2 red, but I will, however, give myself 100% credit for my claims of the Scout Keystone, which ends up being what they are calling colloquially the Investigator Tree. I forget what it's called in the actual game, but it highlights enemies in the environment, which was something I said 1-to-1, and if you kill those enemies, if you set the dog on them or you kill them yourself, you get buffs out of killing them, and it is a very, very powerful keystone, and it was something that I thought for certain would be something that the dog could do, which is like ping certain targets. Now, it isn't the dog that paints the targets, it just happens in lore. We could say that it's the dog doing it, but it is 1-to-1 with what I said. Alright, with that being said, let's go and talk about the last bit of content that's coming with this update. Alright, then finally we got to wrap up with other content. This is like actual kind of content that's coming to the game. I know events aren't like crazy to everybody, but there is a new in-game event. It's called Inferno. Guess what that is, right? So the environment is going to be all fiery. It's kind of dark. It's kind of dim. It's kind of spooky out there, and everything is burning. The floor is lava, has never been more true. They have tons of fire barrels everywhere. There are a bunch of flamers, flame grenadiers. It's just a hell of a time, quite literally. And this is just a regular old event. There aren't any Aquilas available for this one, unfortunately. I guess they didn't want, they didn't want to build on too much success there. It's just a regular old event with the cosmetic frame, but I think people will be playing it enough anyway. They don't really need the Aquilas to draw people right now. I like the event, honestly. Like, it's cool. It is cool looking. The problem I have with it is very difficult to like see what's going on. When I'm been recording gameplay on it, it's like, because it's so dark and the streets and stuff are lit by mostly firelight, it is very difficult to discern what's going on at times. So I haven't been recording a whole lot of that to show as my gameplay footage, just because I think it's difficult to watch. But you'll see me doing it a lot on stream, I'm sure. Then finally, we have Mortis Trials stuff. Firstly, we have new memory echoes. I have heard from down the grapevine that this is something from Shipmistress Brahms, the lady with the mom from Futurama hair, who apparently flies the ship or whatever. I don't know. And Joe Plays Games was saying that there are lines about gene stealers, so good luck with that. There's also a new difficulty for Mortis Trials, Auric difficulty, so Auric Damnation, which will have shortened times in between enemies spawning within waves, right? So instead of having it be like every 10 seconds the spawn door spawns 3 enemies, it'll spawn them like half as much time, or in half as much time. So you'll have way more enemy density. There's more enemies overall with a change wave composition. What I'm hoping is that means way more metal and like threatening enemies rather than just like the same little dread gunners over and over and over again. And just the base difficulty is going up is how I interpret whatever the heck this means. And that's everything, guys. So if you enjoyed this breakdown, make certain you are liked and subscribed. Let's go ahead and hit up our queer facts for the day. Show me them queer facts. Did you know that in 1962, Jimi Hendrix dodged the draft by pretending to be gay? While this is kind of problematic because it's, of course, stolen gay valor, he did use it to dodge the draft, which is categorically very based. All right, everyone, have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Mystery out.